This is not a drill. What you are witnessing, what we are experiencing in real time, is not a mere political spectacle. It is a live-fire exercise on the very foundations of the American Republic. Across this nation, a palpable sense of uncertainty hangs in the air. A country that once defined itself as a beacon of unity now finds its most powerful office not working to bridge divides, but to deliberately deepen them. And in the last 72 hours, we have crossed a line so deeply etched into the fabric of our national memory that it sends a shockwave through our collective consciousness. History itself appears to have flinched. A single image, a moment in time, has now been seared into the American psyche. A sitting president of the United States, in the quiet calm of a late evening, disseminates a piece of digital propaganda so racially charged, so venomously coded, that it bypasses political debate entirely and taps into the deepest, darkest currents of American hatred. The video depicted his immediate predecessor, Barack Obama, and former First Lady, Michelle Obama, not as citizens or leaders, but as subhuman entities. The symbolism was no accident. The timing, during the opening days of Black History Month, was no coincidence. It was a calculated provocation, a stark reminder of a history drenched in racial hatred and dehumanization. This is no isolated incident. Do not mistake this for a random outburst, a chaotic headline from the Trump era. What we are witnessing is something far more insidious, a pattern taking root, hardening into a blueprint. The video is not a stray spark. It is a flare that illuminates a much broader, darker landscape, one that is being systematically constructed around us. This is not just about rhetoric. It is connected directly to real-world consequences. The presence of federal agents in the streets of American cities, like Minneapolis, is part of this very same design. It is the philosophical precursor to the proposal of sending ICE agents to surround polling places, a political maneuver designed to erode trust in democracy. This is a coordinated effort, an attempt to recalibrate the balance of power through both words and actions. And tonight, we begin by examining the aftermath of that incendiary digital moment. The video may have been deleted, but the crater it left behind remains. The White House's response to this moment? A shrug, a deflection, a desperate attempt to blame a nameless, faceless staffer for an act that bears all the hallmarks of the president's own corrosive brand. No apology, no accountability. Just silence, punctuated only by a few reluctant voices within his own party, speaking out with vague discomfort. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina called it disappointing. Yet the most piercing rebuke came from within the very halls of Congress. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries did not mince words. He called it what it was: vile, racist, malignant. He accused the president of being an unhinged bottom feeder. His language was blunt and forceful, because this moment demands it. This is no longer about simple policy disagreements. This is about the moral decay slowly seeping into the core of our national discourse. To understand the full weight of this incident, one must look beyond the pixels of the video. It is what scholars of racism refer to as a trope, an entrenched, destructive stereotype. The depiction of Black people as apes or monkeys is one of the oldest and most insidious tools in the history of white supremacy. It was used to justify slavery, to frame a people as subhuman, fit only for bondage. It was used to legitimize segregation, to rationalize lynchings, and to paint violence as a necessary measure in controlling a primitive species. The use of such imagery by the sitting president is more than just an insult. It is an invocation, a deliberate pulling from the past, reintroducing this vile history into the bloodstream of our politics. This imagery is more than just offensive. It sends a chilling message to a segment of the American population. The president has spoken, and in the language they've heard for centuries, he has told them how they are viewed. And the question is, why now? The context is crucial. Since regaining power, this administration has waged a systematic campaign to undo the visibility, progress, and very history of African Americans in this country. The video fits seamlessly within this broader agenda. The evisceration of programs designed to support minority-owned businesses, the targeted assaults on historically Black colleges and universities, the framing of diverse democratic cities as cesspools of crime, and illegitimate. This is all part of the same design. This video, laden with dehumanizing rhetoric, serves as the emotional and rhetorical fuel for that policy machine. If the targets of these policies are not fully human, not fully American, then why should it matter if their institutions are defunded? Why should it matter if their votes are treated as suspect? Why should it matter if their communities are policed by federal agents who answer to no one? And yet, while the nation struggled to come to terms with the impact of that digital attack, an equally ominous reality unfolded on the streets of American cities, notably in Minnesota. In the wake of local protests, the Trump administration flooded the state with federal agents, an operation dubbed Metro Surge. These agents were not part of the FBI, working collaboratively with local authorities to solve specific crimes. No, this was something far more insidious. These were Homeland Security and Border Patrol personnel, dressed in tactical camouflage and operating in unmarked vehicles. They were a secret police force in plain sight on American soil. This heavy-handed approach turned deadly. Renee Good, a community medic, was shot and killed by these federal agents. Another protester, Alexis Prey, met the same fate. And as the official stories shifted and contorted, eyewitnesses contradicted the claims of the agents. Good, allegedly threatening the officers with her vehicle? Eyewitnesses said otherwise. Then came a bombshell. Menace Now reported that federal prosecutors had a warrant to collect evidence from Good's vehicle to potentially build a civil rights case. But in a deeply troubling development, senior officials, including the politically appointed FBI Director Kash Patel, reportedly shut down the investigation. Why? Because a serious inquiry into her death might contradict the White House's preferred narrative. Justice in this instance was not simply blindfolded, it was gagged, bound, and discarded. Sources close to the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office paint a chilling picture of an atmosphere of purging and paralysis. Career prosecutors, long the nonpartisan backbone of the justice system, have resigned in waves. Their caseloads, involving complex fraud, violent crimes, trafficking, and more, have been sidelined. The machinery of the Department of Justice has been retooled to serve only two objectives: processing a surge of immigration cases stemming from ICE operations and investigating the political opponents of the administration. The message is clear. The law is no longer a pillar of American society. It is now a weapon, a tool of the regime. Senator Tina Smith of Minnesota confirmed this disturbing reality. She described a community in turmoil where promises of drawing down federal agents have been broken. Instead of the 700 agents promised, 2,000 remain. She spoke of ICE agents stalking schoolyards and breaking the windows of legal observers. This is not just a policy shift, it is the tangible manifestation of the rhetoric espoused by the president. This, too, is part of the broader design. The notion that some communities are not fully American, not deserving of the same protections, is what underpins the federal occupation of these streets. It is the extension of dehumanizing rhetoric into action. It tells these communities, your lives are subject to our unchecked power. The chilling thought is, what is the end game here? What is the intended destination for this power? Look no further than the statements of the president and his allies. Just last week, in two separate interviews, Donald Trump floated the idea of nationalizing elections. He didn't use bureaucratic language. He didn't speak of federal oversight. He pointed fingers directly at cities with large black populations, cities like Detroit, Philadelphia, and Atlanta. Unbelievably corrupt, he called them. This is the big lie, repackaged as a policy proposal. The claim that black and brown voters are inherently fraudulent is a necessary precursor to undermining the democratic process. And then came the chilling escalation. His former strategist, Steve Bannon, made a bombshell prediction on his popular podcast. We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. Let that sentence hang in the air for a moment. A paramilitary force already accused of acting as a political tool deployed to intimidate voters at polling stations. The goal is not subtle: to suppress participation, to turn the act of voting into a fearful, fraught ordeal. This is the very definition of voter intimidation. Constitutional experts like Michael Waldman of the Brennan Center for Justice have already weighed in. What Trump is suggesting is blatantly illegal. The Voting Rights Act, what remains of it, explicitly prohibits any form of intimidation. Yet when the very agencies that are supposed to enforce these protections are the ones threatening to break the law, the constitutional safety net begins to unravel. Waldman's advice? Vote early. Vote by mail. It's pragmatic, but it's also deeply tragic. It's a reflection of how far we've come, where citizens are now being advised to evade their own government in order to exercise a fundamental right. This is the dark and insidious machinery at work, a system built on dehumanization, intimidation, and coercion. The racist tropes, the federal occupation of American streets, the threat of voter disenfranchisement, it is all woven together into a tight, closed loop of power. This unrelenting strategy is about more than just politics. It's an attempt to fundamentally alter the American political landscape. The core institutions that have held this democracy together for centuries are being systematically attacked. The courts, federal law enforcement, and, most crucially, the integrity of the vote. But as this darkness gathers, there are signs of resistance. There are moments where the fabric of this emerging authoritarianism is tested. One such moment comes from Maryland, where Governor Wes Moore, the nation's only sitting black governor, has drawn a sharp line in the sand. Moore reveals that since the Trump administration returned to power, not a single dollar in federal disaster relief has been sent to his state. Not one. The timing is telling Maryland did not vote for Donald Trump in the last election. Moore's resistance isn't merely symbolic. In the face of these federal encroachments, Moore has become a vocal opponent of the Trump administration's policies. When the Department of Homeland Security moved to build a new ICE detention center in central Maryland, Moore sent a scathing letter to Secretary Kristi Noem, asking one simple but profound question. How can you find money to build warehouses for human beings, but can't find money to help my constituents recover from devastating floods? Governor Moore's stance highlights a critical dynamic of this moment. As some states bend under the weight of federal power, others are pushing back using every tool of state sovereignty to say, not here, not in our state. And Maryland is not the only state fighting back. In response to aggressive gerrymandering in GOP-controlled states like Texas, Maryland has also taken a stand on the battlefield of political map drawing. The state's Democratic-controlled legislature passed a new congressional map designed to eliminate the state's sole Republican-leaning district. While blunt and politically charged, Moore argues that in a time when one party is threatening to nationalize elections, such maneuvers are necessary to protect democracy. He challenges the state Senate for dragging its feet, comparing the urgency of defending democracy to the frivolous debates over who will win the Super Bowl. The question echoes in the chambers. Shouldn't the protection of democracy be given the same priority? At the same time, new leaders are emerging, particularly in Texas, where a district once represented by a political legend, Congressman Sylvester Turner, saw a year-long vacancy after his death. The special election to fill the seat became a microcosm of the ongoing battle for representation in the face of partisan tactics. Christian Menefee, a dynamic former Harris County attorney, emerged as the victor only after a 7-month delay orchestrated by Governor Greg Abbott to undermine a Democratic district during a critical moment when the GOP's majority was slim. For Menefee, the delay was a cynical move to disenfranchise his community. His victory marks the emergence of a new, forceful opposition to an administration that, in his view, seeks to silence voices like his. The district's gerrymandering, pitting him against another longtime black congressman, Al Green, is just another example of the way power is being reshaped to disenfranchise the people who need their voices heard the most. In that same Texas, a startling victory in a state Senate district that Trump carried by 17 points saw a Democratic candidate flip it by 14 points. This is no isolated victory. This is the spark of something deeper. A growing resistance to federal overreach, to the erosion of democratic rights, and to a system that, for too long, has been bent to serve the interests of the few. As we approach the final stretch toward November's elections, we are confronted by a question that hangs in the air. What is the future of American democracy? Will the courts hold as the Supreme Court deliberates on the fate of the Voting Rights Act? Will Congress challenge the federalization of law enforcement as a political tool? Will the states, like Maryland, choose defiance over submission? And ultimately, will the American people rise to defend their right to vote freely without intimidation? We are not spectators in this struggle. We are participants. The Republic is not a passive entity. It is being tested now more than ever. The ending to this story is still being written. It is being written in courtrooms, in state capitals, in the halls of Congress, and on the streets where power is felt most acutely. As we continue to follow the unraveling of these critical threads, one thing remains clear. The storm is not only coming, it is here, and its fury will only grow. Stay vigilant, stay engaged, and, above all, stay active. Because in this fight for the future of our democracy, every voice matters. This is our watch.